My Bible is open to the Old Testament book of Lamentations. So look, all I want to do is just share a brief devotional here with you, just with a goal and a prayer of just some encouragement and hope on this journey that we are on together. Now, listen, I will tell you that just even finding Lamentations can be a bit of a challenge, tucked there in the Old Testament. And of course, by now you're aware that I read through the Bible every single year, and one of the reasons why I'm grateful for doing it, because if every day I just simply picked up the Bible and said, so what am I going to read today? It is highly unlikely that I would ever be spending time at all in the book of Lamentations. But I'm so grateful that God has made sure that it is here. Now, Lamentations, actually, it comes right tucked off the heels of these majestic books of Isaiah and Jeremiah. Then you find this little Lamentations, just 5 chapters. And then immediately after that, you go into the majestic books of Ezekiel and Daniel. So there, right sandwiched in between the two, a tiny little gem called Lamentations. Now, the reason why it's actually right here after Jeremiah is because it's the same author. So Jeremiah is the one that actually that writes Lamentations. And based upon just even the word Lamentations, it's a lament, it's a sorrow, it's a very sorrowful. In fact, the fascinating thing about Lamentations, to me at least, is it's only 5 chapters, just 5 chapters, but every chapter is a poem. So you have 5 chapters, 5 poems. It is the only book of the Bible that begins with the word how. How. It begins with the word question. And the question is in the context of how. God, how can this be happening? God, how can this be? Because when you look at the context of when Lamentations is written, all the glory, just the life and the living that the children of God have just been accustomed to, and just the gorgeous city of Jerusalem, it's gone. It's gone. And now there's this just burning question that just rises up from deep within the heart of God. How can this be? How can this happen? Because life has just changed. It's not what it used to be because of the crisis that they are going through. I tell you what, friends, it almost seems to parallel with what we find ourselves going through. It's the question that we can easily ask is how? How can this be? How can this be happening so quickly, so rapidly? How can life change? And so it's only 5 chapters, but it's in chapter 3 that we come across just a powerful, poignant promise that I want it to just resonate. I want it to just capture your heart and resonate deep within your soul. Because you come to chapter 3 and Jeremiah is basically just being, oh God, please don't forget. Just please remember us. And then in chapter 3, and I'm just going to insist that you find your Bible, because Lamentations is probably not a book you go to very often, but I want you to find your Bible, and I want you to come to chapter 3, and I want you to make sure that verses 21, 22, and 23, and 24 are highlighted and underlined. Now look, I'm just going to read verse 22 and 23, but you need to read this in your Bible, highlight it, underline it, circle it, because the question is asked at the very beginning, how can this be? How can this be happening? And then Jeremiah comes along and says, God, please remember, please remember, please remember. And then here comes the promise. Verse 22, through the Lord's mercy we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I'm going to share with you a memory that is just burned into my psyche. This happened just a few years ago. So my wife Sharon and I were in Loma Linda visiting my parents. Mom and Dad lived there in the Loma Linda area, and they faithfully attend their home church, which is the Loma Linda University Church. It is a massive church. Hundreds of people worship there on a weekly basis. So their favorite place to sit is down towards the front, maybe 2 or 3 rows away from the very, very front of the church. On this particular Sabbath, the church is packed. And up on the platform is just, it's their full choir. Talented, gifted voice. And then on the platform is a full orchestra. Talented musicians. And then on the organ, their pipe, majestic organ. Their organ is chemo. And the opening hymn on that Sabbath, several years ago, one of my all-time favorite hymns, hymn number 100. It is entitled, Great is Thy Faithfulness. And I tell you what, I can just, as I stand here before you at this very moment, it just all comes back. As the congregation stands and begins to sing, and the voices of hundreds and hundreds of us in the congregation join with the voices of the choir and the orchestra and chemo on that organ. And he's pulled out all the stops. I mean, that majestic organ is just shining in all of its glory. And I'm standing there with Sharon, my wife, and my mom and dad. And we just come to that chorus. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies we see. All I have needed, thy hand has provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. And I don't know, there was just this intoxicating, overwhelming sense of God's presence in my life as I was just singing that song, that majestic hymn with hundreds of others of people. And so I will unashamedly, unabashedly confess to you that my eyes brimmed with tears, and a couple of tears trickled down off my cheeks as I was just reminded in this just magnificent way of just the faithfulness of God in my life. How his mercies, how his compassions are absolutely new every single morning. And that all that I have needed, God's hand has provided in my life, in the life of my family and friends. So listen, I want to make sure that the hymn, the passage resonates in your heart, in your life today. Because we all go through these periods of time where our life starts with the word how. Just like Lamentations. How can this be? How can this be happening to me? But then we need to pause and to be reminded that God's compassions, that God's mercies are new every single moment. And just as he was there for the crisis that was taking place in the people of God back in the days of Jerusalem and Lamentations and Jeremiah, that is the same God whose hand is going to provide for you. And his mercies and his compassions are there for you every single morning of your life. And so, my friends, look, whatever it is that you find yourself in the crucible of your life and your journey that you're going through right now, make sure you take the moment and the time. Search in your own scriptures for Lamentations. You will find it. And go to chapter 3 and make sure that this passage is tucked away in your heart as a continual reminder of what God's promise to you is every single morning of every single day of your life. Fresh, compassion, mercy, faithfulness, and providing for you, because his faithfulness truly is great. God bless you.